What are your thoughts on what the rematch is going to bring? What's going to be different in your mind, Michael? What changes do you think will be made, especially on the side of Vettori, right? Because technically he did lose the fight, whether he wants to think that or not.
I think the change that will be made is I think Vettori's going to go to his wrestling a lot earlier. If you see in his fight against Jack Hermanson, and if you see in his fight, particularly the fight with Kevin Holland, I mean, that was a wrestling heavy attack, and he feels that that's where he beat Israel Adesanya in the first fight, was with the wrestling. That was what made him, in his mind, break away and win that first fight. So I think we're going to see more of a wrestling heavy attack from Marvin Vettori. And I just think his confidence is a lot higher. You see how close that first fight was, and we've seen Israel Adesanya from that fight going forward, just catapulted to the top of the middleweight division, won a lot of big fights, and he did it with style points. No pun intended, hence the style bender. But I think confidence in wrestling on the side of Vettori, I think that's going to be what's different in this fight. He's always been a confident guy, but I think that going back to that first fight, knowing how well he did and seeing where others have failed in the middleweight division, I think that he's going to get an extra sense of confidence. And you couple that with Israel's last fight against Jan Blachowicz. I mean, the only area he really got beat in that fight, which led to him losing, was the wrestling. So I think you pair that with those two components, with his confidence in the wrestling heavy attack and the Holland fight. I think you put all three of those together, and I think that that's where we're going to see Marvin Vettori try to approach this fight.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think the wrestling is going to come out of that bag really quick. And I think, of course, as you said, seeing what Jan Blachowicz was able to do with it is going to give him a big boost of confidence. And we also now have 5 rounds instead of 3 rounds. Who do you think that favors more, right? Obviously, Vettori has had a couple of fights now where he's had to go long distances, really grueling fights, grind things out. So this is what he's been doing building up to this fight. When you're fighting for a championship, in my opinion, it's good to kind of get some dress rehearsals. And he's had those. He's had to dig deep. He's been exhausted in those 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, and he's found a way to win. So in my opinion, I'm going to go first here, Michael. Okay, thank you. I think that it's going to favor Vettori in this one. I think because he's such a grinder, he's such a wrestler. Now that he's got more time to do that, he can still lose rounds early. He can get hurt with something, but if he can just get on the hips, get the legs of Adesanya, get him down and flatten him out and keep him there and wear on him, he's been there before. He's comfortable there, and he's going to, I think, really take advantage of those five rounds.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you there. I mean, Israel's shown in the past he has the conditioning to go 5 rounds, but even Marvin said it himself since that first fight. He's hired a nutritionist, he's hired a new strength conditioning coach, and that's been a big point of emphasis for him. If you go look on his social media pages, the guy's an absolute animal on a VersaClimber. This guy, I agree with you. I think that he's going to be able to weather the storm. I mean, all jokes aside, if you've ever seen Marvin Vettori's head, the guy has a big old Italian melon. I mean, that thing is like a big old cannelloni. I mean, he can take a shot. You know what I mean? And he's a well-built middleweight. Yeah. And, like I said, going into this fight, I feel like he dotted his I's. He crossed his T's. I think he's going to be very well prepared to have a grueling 5-round fight. And I think Israel's in for a tough match. It's hard for me to pick a winner in this fight, Paul. I know that you're calling the fight, so you have to sit this one out. But for me, if I had to make a prediction, it's a coin flip to me. I think this fight's a lot closer than people think. It's hard for me to pick against one of these guys because Israel, him and I, we have the same sponsor, Engage Industries, and I have a little story about him hanging out with my mom at one of my after parties. So it's hard for me to pick against that, even though he's going against my Italian counterpart, my fellow Paisan, Marvin Vettori. I don't got a dog in the fight. I'm just looking forward to being in Arizona and watching it.
Let me ask you one more thing, Michael. Do you think that Jan Blachowicz laid out the blueprint? Do you think it's as cut and dry as that he was able to go in there and wrestle him? Now, let's take into consideration that Marvin is a big middleweight, but Jan is a true 205er. So do you think that what he was able to do to Adesanya, do you think that lays out what other middleweights and in particular Vettori needs to do to get the victory?
That's tough to say, Paul, because of just what you said right there. The fact that Jan Blachowicz is a true 205-pounder, it's hard to say if that is the blueprint. It's like, it's like going back to Kevin Holland. You see Kevin Holland's last 2 fights. It's like, okay, that is the blueprint. but he's going against middleweights, and he's down in AK or addressing that. I'm sure we'll talk about that at another time when he gets another fight. But it's hard to say if that's the blueprint or not, given that he fought Jan Blachowicz, who's a very, very true 205er. Like, I'm sure Jan could win fights at heavyweight. I'll take it that far. But it's definitely something to where if you're Marvin Vettori, in the way that he fights and the way his style kind of matches up to Jan's, it's something that you, like I said, you can build confidence off that. You wrestled him in the first fight. That's where you feel you won the fight, was through the wrestling. You just saw how he did against Jan Blachowicz. So I don't think we'll know if it's the blueprint after Saturday night. I mean, I think that's the safest way to put it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, I mean, let's say Vettori does get the win and it's through a lot of wrestling. I think Adesanya is obviously going to have a glaring issue that he's going to have to go and fix. But also the point to be made is, since he's fought Blachowicz and he lost that way, trying to become the double champ, I'm pretty sure, knowing the martial artist and the guy that Adesanya is, and probably became pretty damn obsessed with going back to the gym and saying, that ain't ever going to happen to me again. So there's two sides to that coin that fans and everybody at home's got to realize. Yes, he was controlled and taken down and beat up on the ground. And let's give Jan some credit on the feet too. He had some moments on the feet as well. But it was obviously clearly the wrestling that overtook him. But that would make somebody like Adesanya go back to the gym and really work on those things.